Listen to the sound and move in resonance with what you hear.
Imagine your back as an ear. How would you listen?
What if your arms were ears? How would they hear?
Imagine your stomach as an ear. How would it listen?
Imagine your feet as ears. Where would their listening take you? what would it be like to embrace sound?
If you were sound, how would you sound? What if every pore of your skin was listening?
How do these sounds taste? try to lean into the sound.
The listening to like energies in the body, and it was like, I just should go there, start, so, and not think too much about it.
You mean with the touch now?
Yeah, not gonna, is it okay?
I mean, it was okay. I realized I could move away, but I didn't. I gestured towards. But I was surprised, since before starting you had said, "We take this for us."
I know.
But I think, Martin, you often play in those areas of almost contradiction.
Yeah.
And it was funny. That's the place you is exactly where the pain is.
Yeah. But that's what I find interesting. It's more like to allow for the opposite, or like to allow for things to be not always governed. That's what we're doing, and that's what we're not doing. And I think perhaps in that particular moment, I was like, that's what I hear. I know we said something as a possibility different, but do I have to do it now because I said it? Is that listening, or is that's the listening for me? it's going places that I don't expect that I go. I think Jenny Sunesson talks about it as looking for nothing, listening, looking for nothing. And this vastly open proposal is actually an undoing of a lot of layers of tearing down how listening should be happening. What you hear is perhaps not always what you plan to give attention to. And of course, I can't say that I'm only listening like to audible things. I listen to concepts, I listen to the space that we're working in, I listen to the working relation that we're in. I'm listening to this past couple of weeks where I'm into research projects and there's a lot of processing going on. And I find when I allow for that without thinking this has to be a Buddhist practice or this has to be a Vipassana practice, which they're wonderful and beautiful, but then I'm already kind of methodologizing listening. I'm already bringing out tools. I already know what they will bring me into. I know the feelings afterwards, which are wonderful. But I'm wondering, like, is there a way that also lets what these practices perhaps embrace? Is there a way for these practices, is there a way for these experiences to also be there in the first place and not always trying to, I have to not do those, otherwise I'm not a good listener, I haven't, these things. So that interests me, and I think I always have a feeling we meet there because you work also a lot on this. I read your Facebook profile, and you put up all these like little scores, which are totally contradictory. It's really nice, and I can completely relate to it. So I think as a person, as an artist, I always enjoy the moments of setting up a rule and then seeing how I relate to it rather than submissing to it. And for me, that's something that's really important. So to not say there are no rules. There are always rules. There's always assumptions. There's always something that's already there.
But it is complicated.
Of course,
Because I agree. I fully agree. But there's something complicated in the sense of like, listening is happening. And isn't that the sort of phenomenological difficulty around the conceptualization of listening? Because you can't help but listen. I hear that birds have earlids. They can shut their ears. I found this very annoying after a night in the tent and the bird. So, I wish I could just. But sound is, I don't know if it's probably the same for birds, but sound is something that enters us whether we want it or not. I had to think a lot about that when we were out. We've started, I guess. I've started recording, so you know.
It's okay.
I make it casual.
Yeah.
But shall we introduce the thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, hello, welcome. Today I'm dancing with Martin Sonderkamp. We met at Escoho in the university, but you invited me extremely generously into a project digital performance with Nord Plus, which is a cross collaboration across the Nordic, sort of some Nordic universities, and it was to do with digital media, and it was with musicians and dancers, and we were there.
And media artists.
And media artists, yeah. True. But it's such a pleasure to be with your work, and you already opened it up here now. I think this, I don't want to speak for you, but you describe my practice so well, desiring to work in that contradiction around order and where we find ourselves at play. And there's a lot to talk about there. But if people don't know you, do you want to try to introduce yourself if I let you situate yourself, maybe? That's a nice one.
Hello, so I'm Martin Sonderkamp. I moved between Stockholm and Berlin. I work here together with Peter at SKH. I'm originally from Germany, have been living in different countries, in Amsterdam, in Turkey, in Spain, and went back to Berlin, and now I'm between Stockholm and Berlin. I think what's central in my artistic practice is improvisation and the relation to choreography, and vice versa, choreography and its relation to improvisation. I have a background in music, and I have a background in visual art. And dance came very late into my life, so I already had a luggage full of things that helped me to actually start dancing when I was 26, 27.
You feel like you've been dancing forever. I mean, when I'm with you, like, you have such a rich body. After we finished, I was saying, it's such a blessing to get to be in practice with someone who can go so deep and can stay with it for so long. Sorry, I cut you off.
No, that's good. It's actually quite nice. Anyway, so Peter and I, we met today here, and Peter mentioned this project that we were in for 2 years, not 2 months, 2 years. And during that, we had an enormous output of scores, ideas, practices. And out of this grew another research project, which I'm currently engaged with Jenny Sunesson. She's a sound artist. Hara Alonso, she's a music composer, electronic music. And there's Ulrika Berg, one of my favorite dancers in Sweden. And also Jennifer Lacey was in it for a while, and she had to drop out.
And we should say that Hara and Ulrika, we were working as a trio a little bit.
Exactly.
When we were working with Nord Plus.
Yeah. So Peter invited me today, and I'm finding myself right now in 2 research projects. One is what I've mentioned, it's called Bodies as Ears, Speculations on Acoustosomatics. And the other one is with a long-term collaborator, it's a visual artist, Darko Dragičević. And I have been going through materials with him from the past 10 years. So we've just looked at material from 2014 to 2018. So I'm somehow forward-looking in the one project and totally backward-looking in the other. So when we met today, I wanted to do something that had to do with doing less. And we had made an audio score, Etudes for Listening, that I then presented to Peter. We went out. It was a short version of it that Jenny Sunesson, Hara Alonso and we had written it. And we went out. It's beautiful weather today, so we went out and went through this score. And then we came back here. And we had said, let's look what is resonating. How can we keep that listening score perhaps more as an echo, as a resonance, rather than reactions to questions that the score asks you to do while listening to sound recordings, field recordings, and the real sounds that are outside, because they go through the headphones that we're wearing.
Yeah. And maybe to say, so this word resonance is important. And also, so in the sound score, there were instructions. And if I remember correctly, the first one was to have the resonance of, was it the back at the beginning, or was the one before that?
The first one is asking you to be in resonance with sound.
That's it.
That's just how it opens.
To be in resonance with sound, exactly. And then it moves into the back as a listening, and the hands and the feet and the stomach and
the skin, the pores.
The pores of the skin. Yeah. It's super beautiful. And I wanted to ask you about, because as we started now, you spoke about Buddhism and the personal, but I wanted to ask you about somatics and somatic listening, because if I understand right, somatics has been a big part of your practice, but you didn't mention it now, so I was curious, could you speak to, in what way somatics plays and how it played for you today? Because for me, I could relate a lot to a sort of very somatic experience.
Maybe short background then. So I studied with Helen Walkley. She taught me at the School for New Dance Development, where I studied in Amsterdam, which was all her explorations and proposals and methods were based on Bartenieff. And Irmgard Bartenieff was a former soloist with Laban. And I always had the feeling that she kind of completed the Laban work by really going very close towards and into the body. Because Laban, when I, as far as I remember, or the way that I met it, had a lot to do with the space around the body, with trying to understand how movement can be categorized, named, how movement qualities, and so on can be probably reproduced also, and of course a large part is the notation. And for all the Laban specialists, I have a partial knowledge of it. And Bartenieff for me was kind of coming more into body to body, and her legacy is being documented only through her students. She never wrote anything, and she preferred to work with touch and language. So she was quite a specialist in this, not so verbal transmission, and you will see that also later in the work of Bainbridge, Cohen, BMC. So she took a lot of ideas from Bartenieff, which I also studied. I studied with Daniela Herlyn, which was at the time the assistant of Linda Hartley, which I think was one of the first women in the UK. who made BMC more known. And then you find traces of that back in Klein technique, which I studied with Susan Klein, Barbara Mahler, and Johanna Hegenscheidt in Berlin. Then I've studied loads of contact improvisation, which at the time was kind of a normal thing in training. I think it's at least the dance scene. So this is like beginning 90s, where I thought that was a brilliant and wonderful way for somebody who wasn't trained to investigate. And I really preferred I wouldn't say like, I enjoyed very much kind of the legacy of Steve Paxton, the kind of really research-based, I thought, with many questions, very simple, and then it becoming rather complex. I really enjoyed his work. And I came into this kind of postmodern training with a complete different somatic experience, because what I didn't like, or what I still don't like, is about the hijacking of the word in white contemporary dance, as if any other technique or embodied expression would not have a soul and a spirit attached to their flesh. Which, if you think about Soma, comes from it's exactly pointing towards that. And I came into it with a very deep, also I would say spiritual experience of having studied or participated in dances from the Ga in Accra, in West Africa. Was a family that invited me to stay with them. They were artists themselves. And furthermore, I had a practice with Alexander technique, where I would take regularly, I think it was 2 or 3 years. It was with Tom Koch. It's an Alexander teacher in Amsterdam. Another one is Silvio Sverlazzo. Another one is Gilles Estrin. And with them, I studied actually often to get injuries out of my body, because I was lucky to have a lot of work, but it's, like having not had so much technical training and being out there on stage, it was quite challenging.
And to link back to the practice today, I love the way you frame the somatic in your journey, in your life, and exactly like to bring about a criticality actually to this word, but to somehow, for me it was a way to try to describe how in the listening became very bodily and very you bring up Buddhism, and for me it was extremely meditative. And so I'm curious to know, and maybe that's what you mean by the order that you spoke of, that it sort of gives a space to move away from an order and an ordering, because the listening is so prevalent. And I think what's really nice is exactly that you have this guide, this very light frame with the leaky headphones, with a sort of every now and again a nudge to consider listening through a different way, and then an introduction of some sound field recording type sounds. And then that combined with the sound of the trees, the helicopters, the wind, one's own movements and the fabrics and everything, continually brought me back to allowing listening to be a generator for my meaning and understanding of my experience. And it was extremely powerful, very kind, caring. Really felt it took the weight of me and my experience, and at the same time allowed me to go to places, to perform agency over my experience as well. I suppose maybe that's also, it's in the world of improvisation as well. You mentioned that word. And for me, it speaks to choreography, which you also said, this relationship, and how choreography, I think you mentioned it, the sense of the choreography is everywhere, and listening allows us to attune to that influence of the order or the production of effect maybe upon one's experience that is happening, and at the same time I'm in conversation with it, I'm in improvisation with it. It's super beautiful opening and gesture, which is so supportive of and that's what's frustrating with the word dance sometimes for me, is that, I was in dance, but like you say, we were very minimal. If I want to describe the relationship I was in with my listening and all the relationship between order, choreography and improvisation, I was dancing, but I wasn't throwing shapes, or I wasn't performing the concept of dancing. I wasn't trying to attend to certain values and codifications around an idea of what dance should be. Even to the extent within improvisation where maybe one is trying to find abnormality or break with habits. And that's what leads me maybe to feel like it was more in the space of somatics, which, because it's not within the realm of dance sometimes, it allows for the improvisation, the movement, the experience to be carried by something other than values around dance, and probably more values around therapy or therapeutic sense, right? However, because you never framed it as somatics, I think it also allowed for a less instrumentalization, because often when we talk about therapy and care, there's a sense of treatment and almost a dichotomy between healthy and unhealthy. Which is then interesting when in here, I have a back problem today, for context. We decided we would work alone in the space, and you came directly with your hands to exactly the point of my back, which was in pain. And I think because it was sort of open in this very creative, playful, intriguing space without order, in a way. It was very beautiful. Sorry, now I've spun a lot of webs.
It's good. It's maybe I can respond step by step.
Yes, please.
So, I wanted to share with you the relation of choreography, what it is for me, because I sometimes experience that there's such drawing borders between things in order to, so maybe to focus on them, that's also okay. But I understand choreography as something that is an order that is comprehensive for somebody else also, something that you can also not reproduce for its identical expression, but perhaps more repeat in terms of giving what you call the order. So it could be an order of events, it could be also how we compose, because for me choreography also means I'm composing, and my questions revolve around a lot, what kind of body do I compose? Or what is already there? So you mentioned this having to break habits, and after 10 years practicing a lot of improvisation on stage, I couldn't really say that I broke my habits as a performance. It was perhaps more to look at, or if I don't do that, then I can see another habit coming up and I can practice that because I like that habit. So technique, for example, is a habitualization, right? Or practice can also become a habitualization of things. You just have to be clear and alert when is it not so conscious anymore. And in an artistic process, you might repeat that practice without knowing it's perhaps the wrong way for what you want to achieve artistically, right? So that's something else. But let's go back to what you mentioned was quite nice. The audio guide for me, that's a choreographic performance. Yeah. All what you mentioned now, and this is actually, funnily enough, we write that in when we applied for it, that it was important for us to find ways that we find a bottom-up experience and a not top-down. And there it is perhaps the dynamics between proposing something, but not telling you that you have to do it. So that's why most of them are questions. It is. Yeah. So we try to actually understand our address to somebody engaging with it, because we're speaking to you. It's three different voices that are distinctly guiding you through a very premeditated way through the body into space and out. So it's and they're timed. We try to give so and so many minutes. So we try to also think about it as a composition where it is foreseeable that something will come. So it's not so uneven. So you can get into, okay, yes, probably it's time for the next things. Yeah. So that one. But while we were writing it, and now I want to come back to collaboration and to choreography as a tool for collaboration, because that's how I practice choreography. I am not so interested in owning. I'm really, it's like, I've had it with the thing of like trying to own everything. I don't think we have to do that. Other people can do that. I don't want to do it so much. So for me, choreography is also just a way of collaborating and to understand in the combination, for example, between what you say, the somatics, if it is not addressing dance, and if it is not addressing therapeutical needs, it's just addressing any bodily experience. And I wouldn't say any body, but let's say it opens up to a musician, it opens up to a sound artist, it opens up to a visual artist, it opens up to anyone who's interested in perhaps experiencing by focusing through the body. So that is an interesting, and that's why I like the practices. I don't always like the framework around things, but sometimes if you remove them and you start to be rather sparse with the information that you give, because we're not giving you so much, it's just a question. When we were writing the score, it was super interesting. In the beginning, I worked with Hara Alonso a lot, and both of us, we get really interested. Oh, let's write a really interesting score, and they're beautiful and they work, but they are so specific that they almost put too much responsibility on us. And they're so tight that there's very little space for the experience of what you call it agency, perhaps also like consenting to it.
Yeah.
So these are things that I find really important in an artistic practice, that the way that I meet my audience is basically through that. I mediate through my body, but perhaps with age I become less and less interested in this being identified as dance in a very particular way. So you talked about perhaps it's more what I've learned from dance. I kind of try to translate and strip away all the things that are for the experience not important. Perhaps they don't bring up what you say, like references to training, reference to techniques, reference to aesthetics and all that stuff, but they are coming from dance in that sense, but they are made available for others. And of course with the collaborators, for example, when we were talking about listening with the back, this is not coming from me, this is coming from the body of a musician.
Yeah.
So she's talking about herself, and we're like, yeah, I'm doing this kind of listening with my body when I play music. And with the other collaborator, Jenny Sunesson, she says, I work with listening through technology, but being aware that the technology is the framework through which I listen. And that's already specific. So what we understand maybe in this collaboration is also that we look for, let's say I talked about composing a certain body, that could be a certain frequency that and that field recorder has when it records and when it plays back and so on and so on. So we're looking in that like for what can be shared from what's already there, rather than saying what kind of concept do we have to make. So it's really like I'm really happy that you mentioned that, this kind of looking at what's already there and can we start collaborating with that. So, and that allows for divergences, because I don't have to submit to the other practice. We just say, let's put it together, you know, what I proposed, and then I heard you back calling. and for me, that's an interesting bit where the combinations, I wouldn't say it's only choreography, but the combination of working with a body that is an agent, using choreography as something that can be used by anybody. Everybody else understands it. They're like, yeah, sure, I do choreography because I make rules, I follow an order, I have a timeline, I think about qualities. So in that sense, we can devise and take away from choreography and put it somewhere else. And dance is still there.
Yeah.
But it is not struggling with choreography.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, and another aspect for me was, and I think I tried to say that with like honoring you as a person, but I think you're so modest in a way that I can already hear your argument, maybe. But what I wanted maybe more to say is that so often it's hard to not feel the pull and the tension of writing the email, answering the thing, or just not listening to use the core instruction of this session. And what was really nice is that this mediated experience, and as you say, like recognizing that the headphones do something. And you were very clear, specific to saying, "Oh no, don't use those headphones. Use these." The device, the computer system, the recording device, and the choice and composition of those sounds in the audio guide, and the voices that I used, exactly as you say, distinct, characterful voices, and then the wording and the directions they produce. It all, even though it points towards something which is omnipresent, always relatable, always existing, never far away. However, it's so hard to get there. It's so hard, and I like to think of myself as a practitioner, that I'm always trying my best to be as close as and as tactile and as listening as possible, in tune maybe. And yet I do this, and then I realize, I've been holding back, or I've not given myself the tools to mediate that experience, to allow myself to be supported in going as far as I know I can go. And that, what a gift. I mean, thank you. I wanted to ask a little bit about if it would be possible to maybe share some of this, the guide, or is this something that we should wait until it's a more conclusive
No, that's
thing?
totally fine. I think it's totally fine. It would be actually a pleasure. I think...
Me too. I mean, we can have it
nice.
as an extra audio file that people could link to. I could link to in the description.
Let me talk to then to Hara and to Jenny, but that would be, of course.
Yeah.
Because we were even thinking about that anyway. It should be then somehow published at one point. Its research should be openly accessible.
Yeah.
And
I really hope that people can have a go at home and have a try, because it's such a pleasure, and I know I will. But how was your experience today of it? Like, has it changed for you? Like, in the practicing, what kind of reflections came up? And maybe I can also speak a little bit more to the present, because now we've spoken a little bit about the situation and some things around.
I mean, for me, it's funny. For me, this is it's a kind of translation out of many things that are realized that COVID brought up. Where, I mean, I experienced COVID, the first wave in Berlin, and it was very strict. I wasn't here. I wasn't in Sweden. So we couldn't go out. We could not. Yeah. And I had to teach. And I couldn't do any physical practice. We don't have that a huge flat. And so I started to think about what and how can I teach things that I practice, but I kind of kept them to myself. They were like, it was something that was like, okay, I can share this, but I also need something that I keep to myself, that it's not capitalized on. I don't get paid for it. It's not part of my job, or it's not part of making it work. It's just for myself. Something that I always thought was also very strange to transmit, because I was like, this is too weird for people if I would bring out that. bring out this kind of very, very idiosyncratic things. So that project for me, together in collaboration with the others, also was a possibility to actually look at those experiences and say, but I have learned something from it. I can't recreate them for others. It's not about that. But when I was listening today, I can't help to look for the faults, or it's like, that there. Do you know, sometimes the sound just has no background sound. It's just, and then there's nothing. So I'm like, okay, here should be a bit like a room tone, or why is there no white noise? And so I do that, but then I also find ways of letting go of that. It's mostly when I don't hear my own voice.
Yeah.
And I had a really interesting way today, because I realized how short it was what we did. That was also due to, we had different versions, and some I didn't have access to a shared file, so I couldn't download it for us, so this was a shorter version. And you mentioned meditative, and for me it has to do a lot with exhaling, but more in the sense of like, I don't have to produce anything, so there's an invitation. Nobody says it should be dancing. There's no expectation, which then also makes me understand how much I like movement.
Yeah,
I have to say, and that doesn't come from dance. I've always had that. You know, I was also a person that loves to move, and always did lots of sports and stuff. And I remember this question: if you'd let your feet listen, where would you go? And I had my eyes closed, and I ended up in a really weird place. I was on a roof of that little cave.
Oh yeah.
It was just brilliant. So that was nice. So it takes me a while, I think, because it's, you know, it's work that I have co-authored, and I look at it.
Yeah.
And I like the ending of the thing when it's leaning into sound, but it's also with the composition, you know. So that I enjoyed. There's also some moments in the score, in the audio guide score, whatever you want to call it, where there's some kind of dragging sound of an object that sounds like a flute, but also wind, and then there's the real wind coming, and it was just in that moment. And so there's like moments of intensity. So I'm not looking at, I think, perhaps how I understood what happened to me in meditation, that you try actually to come to one place that's rather restful. And on the way, you will experience all ups and downs of how emotions, sensations, and thoughts are there, but you try to disconnect. And that's not what it is. So it's a little slightly different than a meditation, because this is more dissociative. And I think we're asking you to associate much more. But we don't go as far as one would go in transient practices or trance practices, where you basically totally connect to what you do through repetition over and over and over and over, so to actually let go of yourself. So for me, it's more the dynamic of different intensities. It's not about that I feel like I'm entertaining somebody. It's perhaps more like an idea of there is a latent choreography, a latent dynamic that's perhaps there as potential, but it's about how you do that. And I hope that happens. I don't know how you experience, but that's more something that I thought can or is predictable perhaps and inherent in the thing, but I don't know.
Well, let me have a go. No, I'm joking. I don't know if you already bring up a lot of things that I also had today. Thankfully, I had the real luxury of not having any knowledge of what it was. So for me, I had very blurry moments because the sounds are very subtle, especially at the beginning. It was unclear whether it was outside or inside, and that was fantastic because it really brought me to a place of listening to both this thing that is happening, but also what is happening inside me, and very quickly I was aware of how much sound I make just by moving, and also how quiet things are as well in the forest where we were, and the attention that was brought to the back and the feet and the hands and the stomach and the paws was really beautiful. The one I really enjoyed was to taste the sound. I opened my mouth. I really enjoyed to sound. Oh, how was it? I forget the right formulation, but it was to sound somehow.
If you were sound, how would you sound?
Yes, if you were sound, how would you sound? And this was really nice to make sound, and I chose to produce sound orally with my mouth, and that was really pleasant to be with that. For me, it was very close to trance, and I completely agree with your reading of how it would differ from meditation. It was not meditation, but for me it did get very close to trance in a way. There was something, I got very not lost, but involved in all the small details and all the small sounds. And it was almost amplified when we came to the studio, because then it's so quiet, right, that there is very little sound in comparison maybe to having audio sound being played through the headphones, and then also all the just busy noise activity around outside. But here, because I was already attentive, I felt like I was really in all the details and subtle qualities of the sound and everything that was producing. And I think you mentioned it a little bit, and it's hard to really understand and to describe, but I was definitely in a place where I might not be making a sound with a movement, but I was very involved in the listening of that non-audible listening. Like the listening itself becomes almost a sound in a way, or like something to listen to. The attention, and the same with concept, as you said as well, when we were together and I would be somehow feeling that you were in a certain place, and you know that sense of like the heat of a body against the skin as they brush by. But more than that, because of the attentiveness, and almost because the listening becomes something one can listen to, then that became material as well. So everything was very detailed and loud. And I think to draw back to the taste as well, the idea that you can listen through taste becomes so obvious almost in a way, that we have this perceptive machine or place where we exist within, and it has so many multiple modalities with which to be with the world, different senses I'm speaking of. And I have to think of neurodiversity or neurodiversity, sorry. And I feel there are so many openings there into being with ways of being with different types of knowledge, different types of understanding, and I don't really want to say practice, but ways of doing, maybe. It was really beautiful.
It's very nice that you mentioned the perhaps or the potential that it's not ordered. So now we come back to order, and I don't mean order as something imposed from above. Order is something that is understood in which way the sensible is distributed. Hello, Rancière. But the politics of the sensible, how a certain type of sensation or sensorium, we can call that maybe, is misunderstood as defective or errant, or it needs pity. All these things. Whereas I think the beauty, perhaps, and also the challenge of it, could be that there is no order given to any sense as the most prevalent. So it's very nice that you mentioned that, here's a supposed through synesthetic, and like perhaps synesthesia as an artistic tool, because I think you mentioned that movement could be a sound. I very often hear movement as sound, and it has haunted me. Because I thought everybody hears music as sound. When I did my first piece, I talked to the people that collaborated with me, and I said, well, you just follow the movement and how it sounds. And everybody looked at me and like, what do you mean? And I said, oh, is it not? And then I found out, and I was 30-something. I had never thought about that, because I was never involved in movement and having to talk about movement. So similar things happen to me with presences of, it's not all the time, but I can say there's days where I hear the presence of others as swooshes and so on and so on. So, but to what I wanted to say is like that perhaps what I find important, and perhaps that's also what I'm a product of in terms of training, is I'm drawing from many fragments of many different techniques and approaches, which in themselves are also fragments of other techniques and approaches, but they come with a very clear, let's say, like almost curriculum framework, what you have to do first. They can be sold and so on, and they can be studied. So I understand, okay, those practices need all these categorizations and the vertical hierarchy, and that's fine, I'm happy with it. But that's not me. I think that's also the maybe a heritage of what had happened before. Things appeared to me never in their pure form, and I'm very happy about it. That I don't have to look for the pure experience or something, but always think, oh, there's always something that's contaminated in a good way. So contamination is not a bad way. There's an infection, or virus creeps in and stuff like that. So for me, this is also much more how I experience the world, and I find that then interesting. How can you work with that? So how how can you become simple enough to allow for complexity, and not what I said before, orchestrate complexity as an ordered thing that one can follow. So that for me is the difference in experience. So it's interesting that you can feel this.
Yeah. No,
the micro layers of that.
It's, for me, it was definitely there. At least today, it was so beautiful. I have to think of Agamben as well. I'm reading his book on bio, and is it Sacra, life Sacra, something. It's something to do with life and sacredness. And in there is this sort of conversation around: do we create the order for ourselves, or do we dominate ourselves? Do we govern ourselves, and can we escape that in governments, or is there a Zoe? There's these different types of life, bio and Zoe, I think, if I remember correctly. And Zoe is sort of raw, animalistic, or something. It's not a perfect way of describing it, but is there a non-ordered, an unordered, an undominated aspect of life, or is life always sort of being dominated? And I think that there's something in there, and I have no answers, and I don't even understand Gamband. I'm not sure even Gamband has answers, but it's really beautiful. Just being with these qualities of what is leading me, and exactly as you say, is a sense singular, are events or things that we look at and see, are they singular, or is it something else? Are we somehow in flux, contaminated, viral, made of multiple parts, somehow blurry? And it's really wonderful to be with. And I think sound offers such a great inroad to that, or at least the concept of listening. Maybe sound is just the clearest modality through which to understand listening, but when it becomes this practice that we've done today, it really gives me a lot to think with and to be with and understand.
My interest was also, I thought a lot about, in Western art, most of the senses are, most of the senses that are being addressed is the visual and the acoustic, and that's it. You go to different cultures, and artistic experience is made through and with the body. And I think that's something that I pondered a lot, and let's say there's different. You have Janet Cardiff that works with audio guides. You have Ligna, which is a company in Germany that work with them, but they do it for very different reasons and in very different ways. And that's why I said, for me, it's not about that it has to look like dance, but it really comes with a very clear references to dance. So for me, it was more a thing okay, I don't need to see people dancing. If they want to, they can. But is there a way to make dance also, or what there is in dance? And I don't mean that there's an essence. Totally not. It's more like stripping away all the techniques and the refinement of a dancer. So what is left, and how can somebody else use it? So I think that's more the thing. And to understand what you said, we talked about therapy, but it's not really therapy. It's also not really meditation. But there is something, and there's maybe something that when you talk about trance, I have experiences with art that are really like trance. I remembered once I woke up, I was in an exhibition, nobody was there, and I literally, it knocked me, a painting, I think it was Graupner, it was like a monochrome, huge thing, and it knocked me out. It's almost like I was sitting already, it knocked me out, and I woke up in the museum lying on the floor, and was like, wow, that's quite amazing, right? So it can have that. I have with other works that I've seen that I fall asleep as an audience, but I'm actually lucidly dreaming with that performance. So I'm totally not bored. So what you're saying, so there's something about intensities, and that's more like, you can't, if they're not found by yourself, it's not the thing. So, and it's not, I'm not looking forward too much, but if there's if you can come closer to that direction, I think that's an interesting thing. So I think that's more how I maybe want to relate to other bodies as an artist. So
I mean, that's a really nice way. I feel like we should wrap it up a little bit, even though I feel I want to continue talking. But maybe that's a nice close. It's like through and with the body to be with other bodies. Yeah. That's it's such a wonderful gift. People can find your research at the university website, I presume.
We're still doing it.
Okay.
So we're trying to, when it's around 15 June, it should be up, but it's still in progress.
Yeah.
And we're going to do a presentation in Halle in September.
Fantastic. But if people are interested and so on, they can email you.
They can email me, totally.
You have an email on the website. I'll link it in the description.
Yes,
and
totally.
I think there's even your phone number. So.
Yes, phone number. No, totally. Yeah, totally.
But you're such a great value to my life, to artists' lives, to the school. It's such a pleasure. I can't wait to see you again in some other form. I know I will be with this for a long time. Thank you, Martin.
Yeah, thank you also for all your attention, Peter.